The Freemasons' plan for complete global control by one governmental body means that they must pave the way for complete global economic union, complete global legislatory and political union, and complete global military union. On March the 25th, 1957, with the creation of the European Economic Community, the first significant steps in the creation of this global government were taken. Since then, the EEC has become a testing ground for the New World Order. With the basic tenets of freedom of movement between member states already established, goods and people can move relatively freely within this one superstate. The plans are already underway for the establishment of complete monetary union, and the powers of the governmental body of Europe are growing every day, paving the way for complete political and legislatory union. All this will mean that eventually, in the superstate of the European Economic Community, there will be one currency, one economy, and one government. And the government would most certainly be a Masonic government. The three most important players of the European community are Britain, France, and Germany. Britain and France have long been Masonically controlled nations. During World War II, Germany was completely annexed by Britain and France, along with the United States, another Masonic nation, and the Soviet Union. The sectors of Germany controlled by the former three countries, the Masonic nations, formed a separate political identity called West Germany. And with the downfall of the Berlin Wall, West Germany has now taken over the former East Germany. Europe is not alone in its efforts to achieve superstate status. America and Mexico are currently the only two members of NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. However, the nations of the South are increasingly being pursued to join. With Masonic superstates in both Europe and America firmly established, global union would be a logical and easy progression. However, there is another problem that the Masons need to contend with if they are to be the masters of this global union. By the 1970s, it was becoming increasingly clear that the population of Europe and white America was rapidly declining. Unless something was done, the expanding size of the population of third world nations would pose a serious threat to national security of Masonically controlled countries. Western consumer power and productivity would reduce, and as a result, they would be completely dependent on that of the third world population. Somehow the gap between Western population and third world population had to be a bridge to restore Western supremacy, or more precisely, Masonic supremacy, at a global scale. In the 1970s, President Jimmy Carter commissioned the Global 2000 report. The findings of the report blamed virtually all of the world problems on the population growth of non-white people. The report went on as far as recommending the elimination of at least 2 billion people in third world nations off the face of the earth by the year 2000 in order to restore Western supremacy. Interestingly enough, also in the 70s, the AIDS epidemic broke out, claiming huge amounts of life in third world nations, as well as amongst the growing black and Hispanic population of America. It was said that the virus originated from green monkeys in Africa and was later passed on to the local population through either acts of bestiality or through consuming them as food. From there on, AIDS spread like wildfire across the African continent and later on to the rest of the world, claiming millions of lives. However, the story was just a smokescreen. On June 2nd, 1988, the Los Angeles Times published an article refuting the idea that the human AIDS virus originated from green monkeys. It uncovered evidence that the DNA composition of AIDS was totally inconsistent with that of green monkeys. In fact, it could be proven that the AIDS virus could not be found anywhere in nature and could only have ever survived in the human biological system. If the virus did not exist anywhere in nature, the question is raised as to where exactly the virus all of a sudden stemmed from. On July 4th, 1984, the New Delhi newspaper in India called The Patriot published an article making the first detailed charges of AIDS as being a counter-biological warfare agent. An anonymous American anthropologist was quoted claiming that AIDS was genetically engineered at the US Army's Biological Warfare Laboratory at Fort Detrick near Frederick, Maryland. Then on October 30th, 1985, the Soviet journal Literaturia Gazeta repeated the charges made by the Indian newspaper, making it an international controversy. All this, however, was easily passed off as a communist rhetoric by the Masonic West. However, on October the 26th, 1986, the Sunday Express became the first Western newspaper to run a front-page story confirming the findings of the Indian and Soviet newspapers entitled AIDS Made in Lab Shop. The outbreak of AIDS has been linked to vaccine programs around the world. The internationally respected London Times newspaper published an article at the front-page story on May the 11th, 1987, entitled "Smallpox Vaccine Triggered AIDS." The article establishes a direct correlation between the smallpox vaccine administered by the World Health Organization to an estimated 50 to 70 million people in different Central African countries and the subsequent outbreaks of AIDS in those regions. The World Health Organization is the medical wing of the United Nations. The evidence suggests that AIDS is a genetically engineered virus spread through vaccination programs in third world countries, germ warfare against the innocent and the weak, aimed at eliminating an entire populace off the face of the earth. AIDS is nothing other than the modern-day final solution, and all of this for the purpose of installing an economic policy that would give complete global domination to the Masonic West. However, for the Freemasons' economic domination on its own is not enough. In order to have Masonic governments at the head of global union under complete Masonic control, an economic union may suffice, but to keep it there, they would need a military union, and that union would be none other than the UN. The United Nations is a general assembly of the majority of the nations of the world. Britain, France and America are already ranked within the 5 major powers of its Security Council, with the others being Russia and China. This means they have enough power to veto any motions passed. In December 1992, the President of the General Assembly declared that the UN must become a functional world parliament, and went on to say that the UN should be equipped with its own intelligence service. However, the UN has already attained military power. It operates its own army, an army that stood back while thousands of Muslims were killed by the Serbs in Bosnia, and instead implement an arms embargo that left the Muslims without any means of self-defense. When UN soldiers were sent to wage war against General Mohammed Farah Aidid during the months between June and October 1993, American helicopters fired on hospitals, houses and civilian crowds, killing hundreds of unarmed people. After an attack in which 71 died, the head of the UN mission, Admiral Jonathan Howe, said, "We knew what we were hitting. It was well planned." This was a clear breach of the Geneva Convention, but when the US military attorney was confronted on these points, his reply was that the Geneva Convention did not apply to the UN forces on the technicality that the UN is not the signatory to the convention. In other words, UN troops were free to commit any